An 18-year-old boy was seen living two separate lives at the same time in Riverside, California and Boise, Idaho. One witness spoke to him in both cities within hours. Days later, both versions vanished, and the case was quietly shut down. But just before he disappeared, he made one call. To himself. Two cities. Same boy. No connection. Until one woman saw the impossible. In Riverside, California, 18-year-old Ethan Cole was known as quiet, polite, always keeping to himself. Hundreds of miles away in Boise, Idaho, another 18-year-old, same face, same voice, same name, was living a completely different life. Different friends, different habits, a different version of the same person. No one noticed. Not until an elderly woman, traveling between both cities in a single day, came face to face with something that should not exist. She spoke to Ethan in Boise, then hours later stood frozen as he greeted her again in Riverside, like they had never met. Same boy, same day, two places. Days later, both Ethans vanished. No struggle, no evidence, no explanation. Families searched. Police investigated. Theories spread. But every answer led to something darker, something impossible. Because the question wasn't just where did he go? It was, how was he ever in two places at once? If you think this is just another disappearance story, think again. Because this one doesn't follow the rules. In Riverside, California, Ethan Cole was the kind of teenager people barely noticed until they needed him. He worked part-time at a small grocery store, helped elderly neighbors carry their bags, and kept his head down at school. Teachers described him as respectful but distant. No close friends, no trouble, just there. Meanwhile, in Boise, Idaho, Ethan Cole was someone else entirely. Here, he laughed louder, talked more. He had a small circle of friends who swore they'd known him for years. He played pickup basketball on weekends, showed up late to class, and lived like any other teenager trying to figure life out. Same name, same face, different lives. Neither version of Ethan had any idea the other existed. Their routines never overlapped, at least not in any way that anyone could prove. No shared social media accounts, no travel records, no relatives connecting the two cities. To everyone who knew him, Ethan was exactly where he was supposed to be, until one ordinary Tuesday, someone saw something they shouldn't have. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. Margaret Halston had always trusted her memory. At 72, she traveled more than most people half her age. That Tuesday, her schedule was tight. An early morning visit with her sister in Boise, Idaho, followed by an afternoon flight to Riverside, California to attend a small family gathering. It was in Boise that she first met him. Ethan. He stood outside a corner cafe, holding the door open for her with a polite smile. They exchanged a few words, nothing unusual. He even joked about the cold weather, something about wishing he lived somewhere warmer. Margaret remembered that clearly. She always remembered details. By early afternoon, she was in Riverside. Different air, different streets, different people. And then she saw him again. Same face, same eyes, same voice. "Ma'am, you dropped this," he said, picking up her scarf from the sidewalk. Margaret froze. You were just in Boise," she whispered. The boy frowned, confused. "I've never been to Idaho." The warmth in the air suddenly felt suffocating, because Margaret knew one thing for certain. She had spoken to this boy before, just hours ago. Margaret didn't scare easily, but this wasn't fear. It was certainty. Standing on a quiet street in Riverside, California, she studied the boy's face, searching for even the smallest difference. A scar, a change in tone, anything. There was nothing. "You held the door open for me this morning," she said slowly. "Outside a cafe in Boise, Idaho. You told me you hated the cold." The boy, Ethan shook his head, uneasy now. Ma'am, I've lived here my whole life. Margaret stepped closer. No, she insisted. You said you wanted to leave. You laughed. Right after you dropped your keys. Ethan's expression changed. Not recognition, but something worse. Confusion mixed with a flicker of doubt. I didn't drop any keys today, he said quietly. Margaret's stomach tightened. Because in Boise he had. She remembered the sound, the way he bent down, the exact words he said after. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't resemblance. This was the same moment, repeated, somehow split between two places. And for the first time, Ethan looked at her like he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but the sound didn't come out right. Look, I think you've got the wrong person, he said, stepping back on the sidewalk in Riverside, California. But his voice lacked confidence now. There was a hesitation, like something inside him was shifting. Margaret watched closely. You made the same joke, she said. About the weather. Word for word. Ethan's smile faded. Because he had made that joke earlier, to a coworker at the grocery store. The exact same words. How would you know that? He asked. Margaret didn't answer. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she scrolled, then held up a photo she had taken that morning in Boise, Idaho, a casual shot of the cafe street. Ethan leaned in and froze. There he was, standing in the background. Same clothes, same posture, same face staring back at him. That's not possible, he whispered. But the evidence was right in front of him, and whatever life he thought he understood, it was starting to break. Ethan couldn't stop staring at the photo. That's me, he muttered, backing away slightly on the sidewalk in Riverside, California. But I've never been to Idaho. I've never even left California. Margaret lowered her phone slowly, her mind racing. Then explain how I spoke to you in Boise, Idaho this morning, she said. Ethan didn't answer, because he couldn't. Instead, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A call. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello. Silence. Then, breathing. Faint. Uneven. Ethan frowned. Who is this? And then he heard it. His own voice. Don't hang up, it said. Ethan's blood ran cold. Margaret watched as the color drained from his face. What is it? She asked. Ethan couldn't speak at first. The voice on the other end sounded panicked. Afraid. I don't have much time, it whispered. They're watching. I think we're not supposed to exist at the same time. The call crackled. Find me before. The line went dead, and Ethan realized something terrifying. He hadn't just heard himself. He had heard the other him. Ethan stared at his phone long after the call ended, like it might explain itself. It didn't. Play it again, Margaret urged. I can't, he said. It didn't record. Of course it didn't. Nothing about this made sense. Back inside his small apartment in Riverside, California, Ethan began searching his drawers, his desk, anywhere something might feel off. At first, everything looked normal. Then he found it. A receipt. Crinkled. Half hidden beneath a notebook. He picked it up slowly. Printed across the top. A cafe in Boise, Idaho. Date, today. Time, 9:12 a.m. Ethan's hands started to shake. That's impossible, he whispered. Margaret stepped closer, reading it over his shoulder. You were there, she said quietly. No, Ethan snapped. I couldn't have been. But the evidence was piling up. The photo, the call, now this. And then he noticed something else. His jacket, hanging by the door, was damp. Not from rain, from cold. The kind of cold Riverside never had. Ethan touched the fabric, his breath catching. Because whatever was happening, it wasn't just in his head anymore. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Every sound inside his apartment in Riverside, California felt amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, even his own breathing. Margaret refused to leave. Until we understand this, you shouldn't be alone, she said. Around 2:17 a.m., the power flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Ethan sat upright on the couch. "Did you see that?" Margaret nodded slowly. That's when they heard it. A soft click. From outside, Ethan moved cautiously toward the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see. A black SUV sat across the street. Engine running. Lights off. His chest tightened. "Do you recognize it?" Margaret whispered. Ethan shook his head, but something about it felt wrong. Too still. Too intentional. As he watched, the driver's side window rolled down slightly. Just enough. A figure inside, watching, not moving, not hiding, just waiting. Ethan stepped back quickly. "They know," he said under his breath. "Who?" Margaret asked. Ethan didn't answer right away, because deep down, he wasn't sure. But one thing felt certain. Whatever had been following the other him had finally found this one too. The SUV was gone by morning. No tire marks. No neighbors who saw anything. Just an empty street outside Ethan's apartment in Riverside, California, like it had never been there. But Ethan knew better. "They're not just watching," he said. "They're waiting." Margaret didn't argue. Instead, she focused on what they could prove. The receipt, the photo, the call, they all point to one thing, she said. "You're not just connected to this other version of yourself. You're overlapping." Ethan frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Margaret continued, "whatever is happening, it's not stable." That's when Ethan's phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time, he didn't hesitate. He answered. Static filled the line at first, loud, distorted. Then came a voice. His voice. "We're running out of time," it said, more urgent now. "They're closing in." "Where are you?" Ethan demanded. A pause. Then, near the river. "Boise," the voice replied. The connection crackled violently. "You have to come find me. If it take one of us." The line cut again. Ethan lowered the phone slowly, because now he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just happening to him. It was happening to both of them. Ethan booked the earliest flight he could find. By noon, he and Margaret were landing in Boise, Idaho, a city that, until yesterday, he swore he had never seen. But as they drove toward the river, it felt familiar, not in a normal way, in a memory that wasn't his kind of way. "I know this street," Ethan said quietly, staring out the window. "I shouldn't, but I do." Margaret didn't respond, because she believed him now. When they reached the riverbank, the air felt colder than it should have. The water moved slowly, almost unnaturally calm. And then, Ethan stopped walking, because someone was standing there, facing away from them. Same height, same build, same jacket. Slowly, the figure turned. Ethan felt his chest tighten. It was him, not similar, not identical, the same. Both of them froze, staring at each other across a few feet of empty space. Neither spoke at first. Then, at the exact same time, they said, "They found you too." A low hum filled the air, and suddenly, black SUVs appeared on both sides of the road. Doors opening, figures stepping out, closing in. The figures moved fast. Black uniforms. No markings. No hesitation. Ethan's pulse pounded as he stood face to face with himself on the riverbank in Boise, Idaho. "No more running," the other Ethan said. "They're here for both of us." Margaret shouted from behind, "You need to move." But neither of them did, because something else was happening. That low hum in the air, it was getting louder, stronger. The space between them began to distort, like heat rising off asphalt. Their reflections in the water started to blur, then overlap. "What's happening?" Ethan asked. The other him looked just as terrified. "I think we're not supposed to be separate," he said. Footsteps closed in. The figures were only seconds away now. "Then what do we do?" Ethan demanded. The answer came without words. Both of them stepped forward at the same time. The moment their hands touched, everything collapsed inward. Light, sound, time, gone. The agent stopped. The river went still. And where two people had stood, there was nothing. No bodies, no trace, just silence. Like they had never existed at all. No bodies were ever found. No records were ever updated. And officially, Ethan Cole never existed in two places at once. Authorities in Boise, Idaho denied any incident near the river. In Riverside, California, his apartment was cleared out within days, like he had simply moved away. Quietly, cleanly, permanently. Margaret Halston was the only one who kept asking questions. But the more she spoke, the less people listened. Some said she was confused. Others said grief had distorted her memory, until she stopped talking about it altogether. But not before she wrote everything down. Every detail, every moment, every impossible truth. Because one question never left her mind. If two versions of the same person can exist at once, how many others are out there right now, living separate lives, unaware of each other? And what happens when they finally meet? If this story made you question reality, then ask yourself this. What if you're not the only version of you? And if you're not, would you even want to know?